Well, good morning. It's Thursday. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning, so I have an hour before I have to go to the old farts lunch. So I thought I'd come out here and confirm what I did yesterday and make sure that what I've done so far works. I've hooked up the headlight. I've got the battery work, the belt horn in here. At this point in time, I've hooked up the test battery down here. Let's see if you can see that. Is this set wide enough? Yeah, it actually is. All right, my test battery has a fuse built into it, a switch so I can turn it on and off, and a fuse. I use a 7.5 amp fuse when I'm testing these bikes. And when I send these bikes out, they have a 10 amp fuse in them. Now you read the manual says to use a 35 amp fuse. Guys, that's a English, British, Lucas 35 amp fuse, which translates to about an American 17 amp fuse. These bikes will run just fine with a 15 amp fuse. These bikes will run just fine with a 10 amp fuse. So I run them out with a 10 amp fuse and a spare taped to the battery. If you put a 35 amp American fuse in there, it's stronger than the wires, and the whole bike will burn up before the fuse will blow. So if you're running a 35 amp American fuse in your motorcycles, take it out and get a 10 amp. Or if you feel more comfortable, get a 15 amp. But I run a 10 amp in all my bikes, and all the bikes I've ever sent out of here have 10 amps and a spare just in case. So anyway, at this point in time, the test battery is hooked up and it's turned on. And let's just go over and confirm a couple things. Let's see. Okay, whoops, now it's on. Okay, at this point in time, hanging up here in the wind is the wire from the battery. And that should come on. I just turned the motor off. Hello. Down here. There, I'm sorry. Now it's on. So you got 12 volts coming here. Going through the bike's fuse. So my battery's fused and the bike is actually fused. Going through here. Heading north up to the ammeter. And it gets here just fine. It goes in the ammeter and out of the ammeter and back to the battery. While we're up here, this is the ignition connector, and you'll notice there's no light. Okay, no light there. And no light back here on this ignition wire, nothing. And no light here back here on the tail light. And the horn doesn't work. Now, let's go ahead and turn the ignition switch to the first position. Okay, now the ignition should be on, but not lights. No lights. And can you see the ignition is on here? And coming back here to the ignition wire, ignition is on here. And still no tail light because lights are not turned on. Okay. Now let's go back up here. Oh, by the way, at this point in time, with the ignition on, the horn should work. And it does. Good. Let's go to the next position on the switch, which I'm working upside down. So let's go this way. Okay, now lights are on. We still have ignition. Can you see that? We have ignition back here. We have tail light back here, and tail light over there. By shaking the shaky wires. That's terrible, terrible condition. So, tail light. High beam, low beam work. Horn works. So basically, this end of the bike is completely wired. Ignition on and off, horn, lights on and off, high beam, low beam. Theoretically, this part has proved itself to be done. And we're bringing back to the back end of the bike the two things we need, one of which is ignition, and the other is tail light. The brake light will come off the ignition wire as soon as I wire the brake light into this. Meaning all these other wires are basically not needed, not doing anything, and I'll just truncate them and cap them off. That's the plan for the day. See what I can get done before I have to go to lunch. Well, I decided to see if the brake switch wires were connected and if they worked. I got down here and found the brake switch, and it's just installed completely wrong. And as I activate it up and down, nothing happens over here, so it's a little bouncing. This is supposed to be underneath of a lever built into the brake. I think this guy is supposed to be under this guy, like that, so he'd be under here. So I need to either take that switch off or take this brake pedal off, which means taking off the brake rod probably. So it's about lunchtime. I'm not sure I'm going to get this done before lunch, so I'm going to have to think on this and decide how best to get this switch in position to work and determine if it will work, because it looks quite special. Not like a normal switch that I take off of, usually being PSAs. Usually that's the switch used in that really weird PSA setup. Okay, so just reached another opportunity for excellence, and the fun just never stops. By the way, as it's hooked up here, it ain't working. He's got no brake light at all, so it's got to be fixed.